Hey everyone, this is D, Movieman, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. So, today I'm coming to you guys with a review for One Night in Miami, directed by Regina King and starring Aldis Hodge, Eli Goree, Kingsley Ben-Adir, and Leslie Odom Jr. So One Night in Miami tells the story behind the famous meeting of Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, aka Cassius Clay as he was known at the time, Jim Brown, and Sam Cooke in a Miami motel room in February 1964, celebrating Ali's surprise title win over Sonny Liston. So this film is actually based on true events. They were actually good friends. They were all present when Cassius Clay defeated Sonny Liston in Miami Beach and won the World Heavyweight Boxing Championship. And shortly after, they celebrated at the Hampton House, which was a motel that was frequented by famous black celebrities. However, we don't know what their conversations were necessarily. So from that standpoint, this is imagining what the dialogue would have been like and other things they would have discussed while they were inside the motel. And this film makes an effort to delve deeper and take a look at that. So I am going to start with the pros. Quite a few pros here, many pros in fact. As I mentioned, this film was directed by Regina King, and this is actually her feature film directorial debut. However, she previously directed for numerous shows including Being Mary Jane, Scandal, Greenleaf, This Is Us, Shameless, The Good Doctor, Insecure, and many others. So it's safe to say that she's not new to this, but she's true to this. So this is just another step for her as far as directing. And then of course, many of you may know Regina King as a very accomplished actress. In my trailer reaction video for The Old Guard, I mentioned If Beale Street Could Talk and how her performance in that film won her the Best Supporting Actress Oscar, which of course was well deserved. But she's done numerous films. I would say the earliest film I remember seeing her in was A Thin Line Between Love and Hate, starring Martin Lawrence and Lynn Whitfield, which of course is a classic black film, a film I've always loved. And from then on, I pretty much enjoyed her in everything she was in, but it really wasn't until she portrayed Margie Hendricks in Ray, on top of realizing that she did the voices for Huey and Riley on the Boondocks, that I really had to step back and realize this woman is like multi-talented. And I've truly enjoyed seeing all of the performances and the different projects she's been a part of from then to now. And I love that now we get the chance to see her make her mark as a film director. I think she absolutely did a great job with her direction for this film. And then to add on to that, this film premiered at the Venice Film Festival back in September. And that is the first time that has ever happened for a black female director. And I love that because that really speaks volumes about the impact she's already making with her first film as a black female director. So yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. So naturally, I am really excited to see what's next for her and what else she's going to do in this field, because I think she's already off to a really great start. And this film actually premiered on her birthday, January 15th. She just turned 50, but of course she's looked the same for the past 2 decades, so you know, that doesn't really mean anything. She looks beautiful. She's so talented. I'm so excited for what's coming for her. And I definitely have to wish her a very happy birthday and Feliz Cumpleaños to Regina King. I definitely enjoyed the casting and the performances in this film. I actually saw where Regina King said there were bigger name actors that she had in mind for some of these roles, but when she approached them, they basically didn't feel like they needed to audition. And she was like, yeah, that's not gonna work for me. And she also said that she believed that the dialogue was the star of this film, which it absolutely is, and that the right actors would make the dialogue completely sing. And I totally agree with that. I think it's to this film's benefit that we had lesser known actors. I think sometimes it is good to have big names because, you know, it draws their fan bases in. You have so many people who will flock to see this project or this film just off the strength of that person's name. And as a result, you get a greater audience and greater support for that film. But I also feel like we don't need actors who are so big and so identifiable that they basically eclipse the film. And when they act, you see more of them as an actor than the character they're portraying. And as we can see, this didn't need names to be successful, and I'm really happy about that. Kingsley Ben-Adir and Eli Goree are relative newcomers to the screen, but they both have been in projects prior to this. Kingsley was a part of the Peaky Blinders series as well as the High Fidelity series, and then Eli Goree was a part of Riverdale and Ballers. But this was a huge leap for them as far as acting roles, these lead roles, playing these very iconic men, and I thought they both did a really great job. So I just did a review for The Invisible Man, and in that review I spoke about Aldis Hodge and how talented I think he is and how I was really excited excited for more opportunities to come his way in the industry. I think this film and his performance in it is just another example of his career being on its way to new heights, as well as him being cast as Hawkman in the DC film Black Adam. I'm definitely excited about that. And then when it comes to Leslie Odom Jr., I was not familiar with him because, of course, I hadn't had the chance to see Hamilton until recently, so I wasn't familiar with him at all. So my introduction to Leslie Odom Jr. was in Murder on the Orient Express. Thought he did a pretty good job there. Had no idea that he was such a talented singer, actor on the stage, and of course now film. I didn't realize how accomplished he was even prior to this film. In 2016, he won the Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical for Hamilton, and he won the Grammy Award for Best Musical Theater Album along with the rest of the cast of Hamilton. So I think that's awesome. I really enjoyed his performance here. I would say even though everyone brought something, his performance as Sam Cooke just had a little extra something for me. I would also recommend that you guys stick around for the end credits because Leslie Odom Jr. sings a song called Speak Now, and it was phenomenal. I was listening to it all the way home, and I think it was a perfect way to close out the film. It really resonated, and I am definitely excited to see more from him. I'm really excited to see more from all of these men because they all had a hand in bringing these prolific men, these historical figures to life. And each of their performances in one way or another, it really resonated with me. One thing you should know about me is that I am a really big dialogue person, and it's only gotten more significant as I've gotten older. But really great dialogue can really enhance a film for me. It can be great in other aspects, but that dialogue, when it hits right, it just, I don't know, it takes it somewhere else for me. Kemp Powers wrote the screenplay for this film, and it's based on the play that he created that this film is adapted from. I really appreciate how he uses the setting, the circumstances, the time period regarding these four very important men to delve deep into some very layered topics and conversations. Things start very casually, and as the film progresses, we really get deep into some things. Some of the topics that are discussed are Black-owned business, colorism, sellouts, the crossover effect, Black empowerment, economic freedom, veiled racism, brotherhood, using your platform, using your voice to shed light on the reality of being Black in America, and so much more. There were so many things that were discussed throughout this film that really just hit home. And what really hit me is the fact that just about every conversation that they have in this film are conversations that we are still having 6 decades later. That really hit me hard, which makes this very timely and very relatable, but in many ways it makes it very sad to think that even with all the progress that we have made, there are still some things that have remained unchanged after 6 decades. Each of the men in this film are experiencing a significant change, and they are in the midst of a transition into another aspect of their lives. For Malcolm X, it's moving away from the Nation of Islam and not necessarily identifying with that group the same way he used to. And that's in contrast to Cassius Clay, who is moving away from his identity as a boxer and moving towards the Nation of Islam and his future identity as Muhammad Ali. For Jim Brown, it's moving away from his identity as a celebrated athlete and pushing to be taken seriously as an actor. For Sam Cooke, it's pushing away from his identity in a particular style of music and what his audience is used to, and trying to push to do something with a bit more weight and significance to it, and becoming very conscious of what he wants to say with his music and with his platform. So with all of this going on between the four of them, I think it made it really interesting to hear their perspectives on their lives, on each other's lives, how some aspects of their lives paralleled, how other aspects of their lives contrasted. And although this is very dialogue heavy as a result, it still for me was very engaging to watch. So naturally I enjoyed the design of the 1960s, the style, the costume, the music, all of that. I actually had the chance to see this at a drive-in theater, and it is one that's been around since 1949, so that environment really added to the old school vibe of this film, and I really had fun watching it. I also really enjoyed the ending. As I said before, this is an imagining of what happened with these four men, so everything is not 100% factual, which also means that some things are off chronologically. However, the ending still resonated with me a lot. It closes out with something that's very classic and very familiar, especially if you are Black and you have grown up with this particular thing. Something I found to be really interesting is that that whole end scene, the filming of that scene happened to fall on February 7th, and it just so happens to be the exact same date of what's being depicted in that scene 56 years earlier. I was really blown away when I found that out. And how the ending is actually an addition made by Regina King, similar to Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, where the ending is new material to supplement the original play and the original source material. And I think in both cases, it really added to the film and brought everything together. So I appreciated that. So when it comes down to the cons, I think there was really only one central con for me. This, of course, is a film that is based on a play. I think the difficulty with making films based on plays is that films and plays as mediums, they have similarities, but they're very different as far as the environment and the audience. I personally have always loved going to the movie theater and attending live theater since I was a child. And I think when you attend live theater, there's something very intentional and very specific about that environment. We know that we're here to watch this very specific setting on the stage within these very specific confines, and that the story, the characters, everything else is going to move within those confines. And even though the focus is the actors on stage, we as an audience are kind of participating in that space, because we as an audience are also participating in that space, not just as spectators, but also as commentators, you know, with the laughter, with the gasp and the applause. But with film, it's not necessarily the same experience unless you're on set. But watching as a viewer, it's very, very different. And I think for a lot of us, we are used to seeing film as something very visual, very in your face. Even when it's not action specific, we're used to seeing, a change in location, a change in scenes, a progression in time, so to speak. There's a certain flow to a film that isn't the same on the stage. And with stories like this, Fences, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, it confines you to a specific space because that is what the source material calls for. So it's hard to really get beyond that because that's where the foundation of the story is. So it can feel very claustrophobic in a sense because it's like, why are we in this one place and why is there not a lot of things happening outside of this space? But that is usually what those stories call for. And then as a director, there are different ways to adapt the source material of a play. I think a lot of us are familiar with the film Steel Magnolias. It's definitely a classic, but that is also based on a play. And the director of that film, Herbert Ross, decided to open things up a lot because in the original play, the story, the dialogue, these characters, everything progresses and everything happens inside of Truby's salon. That is the general setting of the play. And in the film, it opens things up a lot. We see these women's lives. We see their community. We see their day-to-day. It's beyond just Truby's salon. And that was a choice that the director made. And I think a lot of people enjoyed that. But this film sticks a lot closer to its roots on the stage. And I will give them credit because I think even with those limitations, they really made sure it was still moving. So there's more going on so that it doesn't feel that way the entire time. We still are in this central location, but there is still a sense of movement that is happening throughout the film and throughout this story. And so I mentioned it as a con because it can kind of detract from the experience sometimes, especially if you're not prepared for it. And I think that although it does reflect the film to an extent, it is a greater reflection of those two mediums and how those mediums work very well individually, but sometimes bringing those together can be a little bit of a conflict. It does require the viewer to kind of hone in a little bit more. Some people may appreciate that and have the patience for it, but some people may not, which I can understand either way. And this is a film that really requires your time and attention and focus in a way that some films may not. So I'm going to give One Night in Miami an A-. Solid direction from Regina King, great screenplay from Kemp Powers, and very impactful performances from Aldis Hodge, from Eli Goree, from Kingsley Ben-Adir, and Leslie Odom Jr. Very well made, very thought-provoking, and all in all, a very well done adaptation. One Night in Miami is currently streaming on Amazon Prime, so you guys can check it out, leave your thoughts below, and let me know what you think. So, once again, this is D, Movie Man, signing off, and I'll see you at the movie.